Welcome to this explainer. Now, that was an absolutely excellent question, Captain. Transitioning from a traditional military, a barracks mindset, into a United Nations police operation, well, that requires a massive paradigm shift. You specifically asked about translating traditional military English into tactical UN English, so we're going to divide this briefing into two distinct parts: your traditional drill commands and your tactical field engagement. Because in UN missions, your primary weapon isn't actually your firearm, it's your words. So let's dive right into how we navigate this incredibly high-stakes environment.
So, how do we adapt our communication for these intense, unpredictable missions? First, we have to recognize the standard military drill commands you were asking about. Things like attention, which instructors often just yell as 10 hut. Then you have stand at ease, right face or left face, about face, mark time, march, forward march, squad halt, and your weapons drills like shoulder arms, present arms, and order arms. Now, I do need to give a quick disclaimer here. These specific drill commands, along with a few standard street policing phrases we're going to cover, are international, NATO, and US standard jargon. So they are technically external information, and you won't find them explicitly written in our provided UN manuals. The official UN doctrine focuses heavily on the actual rules of engagement and de-escalation, which is the core, life-saving concept out in the field.
And this slide right here brilliantly illustrates that difference. When we compare traditional military rules of engagement with the UNPOL Directive on the Use of Force, or the DUF, a really key distinction emerges. You see, the term rules of engagement legally relates to military hostilities and combat, but as UN police, we do not operate under ROE, we operate under the DUF. It represents a fundamental shift from a combat-oriented mindset to a policing protective mindset that's entirely focused on basic law and order.
So how does this actually translate into field behavior? Looking at the official UN doctrine, the core principle is necessity. As law enforcement officials, our golden rule is to proactively de-escalate conflicts. You always have to ask yourself, is it possible to negotiate or mediate here? Using force is strictly the absolute last resort. It's only to be used when dialogue, negotiation, and literally every other non-forcible means have completely failed to get an individual to cooperate.
This brings us to the principle of proportionality, which breaks down the gradation of force. Basically, an escalation in physical force only happens if your initial verbal mediation is proving completely ineffective. We don't just jump straight to drawing a weapon. Before doing so, we rely on our physical presence and verbal commands. We use standard international police jargon, things like don't move, freeze, let me see your hands, put your hands on your head, or calling out an armed suspect, all just to gain control of an uncooperative or hostile individual.
Which brings us to the absolute most important phrase you are going to learn today. For your upcoming AMS test, if you take away anything from this explainer, it has to be this mandated warning. According to the directives on the use of force, if you realize you have to use force, you must first identify yourself in the local language and in English and shout loudly and clearly, United Nations, stop, or I will use force. You have to memorize this exact standard phrasing. And remember, unless waiting places you or civilians in imminent danger of death or serious injury, you absolutely must allow reasonable time for this warning to be obeyed.
Okay, let's transition from theoretical rules to the high-stress reality of the field. We're going to look at standard operating procedures, specifically focusing on how to use exact, clear English to maintain control, de-escalate threats, and protect human life when things suddenly go wrong.
Here is our first scenario, an ambulance interception. Just imagine this. A UN ambulance carrying severe casualties is suddenly stopped by local militia at an unauthorized checkpoint. The guards are hostile, they're armed, and they are demanding to search the vehicle. This is exactly where international humanitarian law must be enforced, and it has to be done through clear, confident, verbal negotiation.
In a tense moment like that, your vocabulary is literally your shield. Here are your standard operating tactical commands. You say, drop the weapon. This is a medical transport. Emphasizing drop the weapon is standard tactical vocabulary for neutralizing threats to medical staff. You follow up immediately with, we have critically injured patients inside. Under international humanitarian law, grant us safe passage. These exact English phrases are designed to secure passage neutrally but firmly. You're standing your ground without unnecessarily escalating to physical violence. Let's move to an even more volatile scenario. What happens when a field hospital takes direct gunfire? In this situation, you were suddenly under fire from an armed group, there are active casualties all around you, and you must rapidly control the chaos to protect the medical staff and civilians. Any hesitation or poor communication here, it costs lives.
In exactly that kind of nightmare scenario, you initiate the emergency evacuation protocol. Notice the critical tactical vocabulary you need here: field hospital, casualties, and deploying the QRF, which stands for Quick Reaction Force. You need to immediately report to the Tactical Operations Center, the TOC, via radio, establish a secure perimeter, and initiate an emergency evacuation.
Now, when entering a kill zone or taking direct fire, you might hear the military patrol jargon, contact front. Following that, your English commands must be incredibly short, precise, and authoritative. Just look at these action commands. Everyone stay away from the windows. We need to evacuate the ICU first. Secure the perimeter immediately. You are not having a debate or a long negotiation here. You are giving short, lethal, life-saving instructions to move panicked people out of the danger zone.
Now, let's escalate to the absolute most extreme scenario you might ever face on deployment: a hospital under an incoming airstrike. We are talking about a massive mass casualty incident, or MCI. Jets are inbound, explosions are hitting less than a kilometer away. In this catastrophic situation, your communication must be absolute, immediate, and perfectly sequenced.
You have to follow the strict chronological protocol. At 0 seconds, you issue the airstrike warning shouting, "All personnel take cover immediately." At 30 seconds, you command, "Brace for impact, move patients to the underground shelter." And by 60 seconds, you are on the radio to the TOC, officially declaring an MCI and activating the bunker protocol. The goal is to save the hospital staff before radio communication is deliberately cut off and you go dark.
So what's the ultimate takeaway here? Under the immense stress of crossfire or an airstrike, your communication must be precise, it must be lawful, and whenever humanly possible, aimed at immediate de-escalation. Captain, mastering these exact English phrases, deeply understanding the gradation of force, and nailing that AMS test isn't just about passing an assessment. It is the absolute key to protecting civilians, fulfilling the mandate, and bringing your entire team home safely. Knowing all of this, how will you ensure your words are as sharp and ready as your gear for your next deployment?